there's a pattern that echoes through time. A loop that begins, collapses, and begins again. Every age believes it is the first, yet the ruins beneath our feet whisper otherwise. From the earliest myths of Pandora's box, that forbidden vessel said to unleash all suffering upon humankind, to modern theories about cycles of extinction and rebirth, there runs a single thread. Knowledge once opened can never be closed, and what is forgotten always finds a way to return. What if humanity itself is part of that loop? What if our origin was never a single point in time, but a recurrence, an echo of civilizations erased, reawakened, and rewritten? The ancient Sumerians spoke of gods descending from the heavens to shape mankind. The Vedas hinted at yugas, vast cycles of rise and decay, and even physics now suggests the universe might endlessly expand and collapse like a cosmic breath. If so, perhaps Pandora's box was not a myth, but a memory, a warning encoded in story form, reminding us of the danger in remembering too much, too soon. Welcome to Historic Sleep. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. There is a theory, faintly whispered across disciplines that rarely meet, that humanity's true origin did not begin with evolution, nor divine intervention, but with an event, not a birth, but a reopening, like an ancient loop closing upon itself once more. What if we are not the beginning of consciousness, but its reemergence after an earlier age fell into silence? Archaeologists have long wrestled with the puzzle of sudden sophistication. Around 11,600 years ago, when the Ice Age drew to a close, something extraordinary occurred. Civilizations appeared almost overnight, bringing agriculture, monumental architecture, astronomy, and complex rituals. Mainstream history calls it the Neolithic Revolution. But in sites like Göbekli Tepe, in southeastern Turkey, we find a riddle carved in stone. Temples older than any known civilization, erected by people who, according to traditional timelines, should still have been hunter-gatherers. The stones at Göbekli Tepe rise from the earth like silent witnesses, their surfaces etched with animals that seem to belong not to any single place or time. Some scholars have noted strange astronomical alignments among the pillars, hinting at a knowledge of precession. The slow wobble of the Earth's axis, measurable only over thousands of years. Others whisper that these carvings record a cosmic catastrophe, the end of a prior age, perhaps one wiped away by the same flood myths preserved in every ancient culture. What if these were not the first temples ever built, but the last memory of something far older? A civilization whose knowledge was deliberately buried, only to be uncovered millennia later by their distant descendants. Göbekli Tepe was not destroyed. It was entombed. Someone covered it with layers of earth on purpose, as though protecting a message meant to be rediscovered at a precise moment in time. And perhaps that message was this: history repeats, but not by accident. If humanity is a loop, then somewhere in our forgotten past lies the previous cycle's Pandora's box, the one that unleashed the forces that ended their world. In Greek myth, Pandora was not evil. She was curious. She opened the box not out of malice, but out of the same impulse that drives discovery itself, the thirst to know. Yet once she lifted the lid, chaos and suffering escaped into the world, leaving only hope behind. The story reads like allegory, but could it have been a cultural echo of something real, a warning from those who had lived through knowledge gone too far? Consider the myths of the pre-flood world: Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, or the Golden Age before the Deluge. In each account, humanity ascended too high, mastering energies or sciences beyond their control. In Mesopotamia, the gods sent a flood because mankind had learned too much. In Mesoamerican myth, the fourth sun collapsed because humans defied divine order. In India, the Mahabharata describes wars fought with celestial weapons capable of leveling cities, a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. The descriptions sound eerily like radiation or explosions, and when scientists found layers of ancient glass fused into sand, tektites, across Rajasthan, speculation reignited. Could these be remnants of a prehistoric cataclysm, one that marked the end of a cycle? Modern science tends to dismiss such correlations as coincidence, but every myth, at its root, is an encoded memory, distorted, translated, reinterpreted, but never entirely false. When enough myths align across continents that never touched, one must ask, were they all imagining the same story or remembering the same event? There's another layer beneath this question, one buried not in ruins, but in the human genome itself. Geneticists have traced modern humans back to a near-extinction event roughly 70,000 years ago, possibly caused by the eruption of Mount Toba. The population bottleneck that followed could have reduced humanity to just a few thousand individuals. But what if that was not merely a natural disaster, but part of a reset? What if consciousness, or civilization itself, undergoes periodic loops of erasure and rebirth, much like the physical world cycles through extinction and renewal? Some physicists now propose that time may not be linear at all, but recursive, a repeating structure in which the past and future continually fold into one another. If that's true, then every civilization, including ours, might be destined to rediscover the same truths, make the same mistakes, and open the same box again. Pandora's box could be the metaphorical symbol for each epoch's forbidden knowledge, a boundary crossed when curiosity exceeds wisdom. Think of how knowledge itself behaves. Once discovered, it cannot be undiscovered. When early humans learned to control fire, they transformed evolution. When they split the atom, they threatened existence. Each revelation carries both creation and destruction within it, the dual essence of the box. In recent decades, some scientists have begun to notice anomalies in our past that do not fit the official timeline. Perfectly drilled granite cores in Egypt that seem to require diamond-level precision. Massive polygonal walls in Peru and Bolivia, where 100-ton stones interlock with microscopic accuracy, as though molded. Maps from the Renaissance era, such as the Piri Reis map, showing coastlines of Antarctica free of ice, centuries before modern discovery. Artifacts like the Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old analog computer whose complexity rivaled clockwork centuries later. Each of these objects raises a quiet question. Did knowledge once exist that should have been impossible for its time? The standard answer is coincidence, misinterpretation, or random genius. But when patterns repeat, denial begins to sound like faith. Imagine, for a moment, that a prior civilization reached a level of understanding that blurred the line between matter and consciousness, what today we might call quantum cognition or energy manipulation. Perhaps they learned to harness the fabric of reality itself, to bend it, to open doors between worlds. In that light, Pandora's box could be less of a myth and more of a memory, a remembrance of a moment when something was opened that could not be closed, when the loop collapsed upon itself. Ancient symbols hint at this. The Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, appears in Egyptian, Greek, and Norse mythology alike, representing eternal return. In Hindu cosmology, the universe itself is cyclic, destroyed, and reborn endlessly. The Mayans described epochs of creation and destruction, each one ending in fire or flood. And yet, in each story, a remnant survives. To rebuild, to begin again. Perhaps that remnant is us. Perhaps we are the survivors of a cycle so ancient we no longer remember the world that came before. Our myths, our monuments, our genetic code, all may carry fragments of that lost world. But if we are indeed the new iteration of an old pattern, then the question is not how we began, but what we forgot. What knowledge did they possess that led to their fall? What warning did they bury in stone, in story, in the human soul itself? And why, even now, do we feel the same pull, the same drive to push past the veil of the unknown, no matter the cost? Could it be that the loop is not just historical, but existential, that humanity itself is the mechanism through which the universe remembers? In that case, Pandora's box was never closed. It was reset, waiting for the next hand, ours, to lift the lid once again. As the night deepens and the wind carries the whispers of forgotten ages, one question remains. Are we the architects of the future, or the echoes of a past that refuses to die? And if time is truly a loop, when we finally reach its end, will we find the beginning waiting for us once more? Across the deserts, beneath the oceans, and buried in forgotten mountains, traces of a story too large to fit within our official history keep resurfacing. They appear not as complete relics, but as fragments, patterns, symbols, anomalies that seem to echo one another across time and continents. Taken alone, they are curious. Seen together, they begin to form the outline of something unsettling, a memory of humanity older than the species itself. The question is not whether evidence exists. It is whether we are willing to recognize it for what it is. In 1968, a professor of zoology named Thomas Lee discovered a series of stone structures near Lake Huron in Canada, submerged beneath the icy water. When dated, they were found to be more than 9,000 years old. The site should not have existed, not according to the conventional timeline of civilization. Similar anomalies have been found on the seabed near Yonaguni in Japan, off the coast of Cuba, and in the Gulf of Cambay in India. Each shows signs of human design, terraces, steps, geometric angles, and each lies deep below the current sea level, suggesting they were built before the oceans rose. What world existed before the flood? Geologists tell us that sea levels rose by more than 100 meters at the end of the last ice age. That would have swallowed entire coastlines, the very places where early civilizations would have flourished. If the global population before that event was concentrated near water, then most of their settlements, their temples, their written records, would now be gone, erased not by time, but by the ocean itself. This possibility has quietly haunted the margins of archaeology for decades. The flood myth, present in over 600 cultures worldwide, might not be myth at all. It might be memory. Yet there is a deeper, more disturbing layer beneath that memory, one that touches the essence of what it means to be human. The story of Pandora's box may not describe a divine punishment, but a technological or cognitive threshold. Perhaps opening the box represents a moment when a species crosses a line, unlocking forces that can no longer be contained. Some researchers have drawn parallels between mythic falls and genetic shifts. Roughly 200,000 years ago, something inexplicable occurred, a sudden leap in human intelligence and symbolic thinking. The human brain nearly doubled in complexity, language appeared, and culture began to spread. Geneticists call it the Great Leap Forward. The cause remains unknown. There is no gradual buildup, no missing link that explains the transformation. It's as if the box was opened and we, Homo sapiens, emerged not as animals, but as something new. Every culture seems to remember this transformation differently. In the Sumerian tablets, the gods fashion mankind from clay and breathe life into them. In Genesis, God does the same. In the Popol Vuh of the Maya, the creators make humans first from mud, then from wood, and finally from maize, the one that lasts. The theme repeats. The first attempts fail, the final succeeds, and each iteration is an experiment. Were these stories metaphorical? Or were they attempts to explain an encounter so profound that it fractured memory itself? The idea of external intervention, whether divine, extraterrestrial, or interdimensional, is not new. Zecharia Sitchin's controversial Anunnaki theory proposed that advanced beings may have guided early human genetics, leaving behind myths that later became religion. Mainstream academia rejects this as pseudoscience, yet the ancient texts remain clear, detailed, and consistent across civilizations that never met. They all describe teachers from the sky, shining ones, or those who descended in chariots of fire. Whether these were literal beings or symbolic depictions of knowledge itself, the effect was the same: a sudden ignition of intelligence, as if someone flipped a cosmic switch. In that light, Pandora's box might represent not punishment, but awakening, an irreversible consciousness event. The evils released into the world could symbolize the burdens of awareness: mortality, desire, fear, time, and the knowledge of death. Once awareness arose, innocence ended. Humanity became self-aware, the very act that separated us from the rest of nature and perhaps from the beings that preceded us. But if awareness is the gift, what is the loop? Ancient mystery schools from Egypt to Greece hinted at a secret understanding of cycles: the great year, the precessional rhythm of the Earth's axis, roughly 25,120 years long. They believed that history moves through repeating ages of light and darkness, wisdom and forgetfulness. Plato wrote that knowledge is never gained, only remembered. The Hindus spoke of the yugas, 4 ages through which humanity rises and falls like a breath. The Maya recorded cosmic time in Baktuns, seeing history as a spiral rather than a line. If these traditions are describing the same phenomenon, a cyclical universe of rise, collapse, and rebirth, then the loop is not just metaphorical. It is the architecture of existence itself. Each cycle begins when the box is opened, when a species rediscovers the knowledge that destroyed it before. In our era, that knowledge takes the form of particle accelerators, artificial intelligence, genetic editing, and the manipulation of forces we barely comprehend. We are once again peering into the void, lifting the lid with trembling hands, certain that this time will be different. Yet deep within us, something remembers. Why do we dream of floods, of falling skies, of worlds reborn from ash? Why do myths thousands of years apart describe the same sequence of events? Creation, hubris, catastrophe, renewal? Could these not be cultural coincidences, but inherited memories passed through time, encoded not in books, but in DNA itself? Epigenetics has already shown that trauma can be inherited across generations. What if collective trauma, the memory of a global fall, echoes through every human mind, surfacing as mythology, religion, or déjà vu? If humanity's origin is a loop, then perhaps our future has already happened, many times before. Each cycle begins in innocence, ascends through discovery, peaks at mastery, and ends in collapse. And each time, the survivors mistake the ruins of the past for miracles, the relics for gifts from gods. Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids, the underwater cities, the impossible artifacts. They might not be remnants of a single lost civilization, but the fingerprints of multiple ones, each rising from the ashes of the last. Each iteration opens the box anew, convinced it is the first to do so, and always hope remains, the final thing left inside the box. Hope that the next cycle will be different. Hope that this time, wisdom will match knowledge, that consciousness will expand without consuming itself, that the loop will finally break. But what if the loop cannot break, because it is not a curse, but a design? Some physicists now explore theories of a self-observing universe, one that evolves by rediscovering itself through intelligent beings. Consciousness, in this view, is not an accident of matter, but its mirror. Each civilization that arises, destroys itself, and rises again is part of the universe's way of learning what it is. The box, then, is not a trap. It is a necessary mechanism, a trigger that resets the experiment whenever the system reaches saturation. We are living, perhaps not at the beginning of the story, but near its midpoint, in the phase where awareness outruns wisdom, and the loop prepares to close. Our myths whisper warnings, our technologies mirror the old powers, and our curiosity burns brighter than ever. So the question is no longer if Pandora's box exists. It is, how many times have we opened it before? And when the cycle completes, when knowledge once again floods faster than we can contain it, will we remember what we once were? Or will we, like those before us, become the forgotten architects of the next beginning? In the silence between eras, the box waits, its hinges rusted by eternity, its contents unchanged. Not evil, not good, simply inevitable. Perhaps that's the true secret of the loop. It does not punish or save. It simply continues. And somewhere, beneath the waves, beneath the sand, beneath the myths that we call history, lie the remnants of the last ones who believed they could control what they had awakened. What did they see when they lifted the lid? And what will we see when we do the same? If the loop is real, then every age that rises carries within it the blueprint of its fall. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. Knowledge ignites, curiosity expands, boundaries blur, and soon the same hand that builds also destroys. But there is another layer to this cycle, one that few dare to acknowledge, the deliberate act of forgetting. What if humanity's amnesia is not an accident, but a mechanism, the final safeguard written into the loop itself? History, as we know it, begins not with the first civilization, but with the first recorded civilization. The Sumerians, around 3500 BCE, are credited with inventing writing, agriculture, law, and astronomy. Yet they themselves spoke of teachers who came before them, those who descended from the sky, and those who ruled before the flood. Their king lists record 10 antediluvian kings who reigned for tens of thousands of years before the waters came. When the flood passed, kingship was lowered from heaven once again. It is a strange phrasing, not created, but restored. Every ancient culture shares this dual memory of a world before history and of knowledge descending rather than evolving. The Egyptians called this era Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods and humans coexisted. The Greeks remembered the age of Kronos, a golden era of peace and abundance that ended in catastrophe. The Hindus called it Satya Yuga, the age of truth before the decline. Each myth begins with light, ends with loss, and hints at a deliberate concealment, as though the world's memory had been reset. But by whom? And why? Imagine for a moment that the collapse of each cycle is not purely natural, not only floods or comets or quakes, but guided, contained. When knowledge reaches a threshold too dangerous to sustain, perhaps something or someone intervenes to close the loop. In mythic language, this becomes divine punishment. Zeus sends the flood, Shiva dances destruction, Yahweh resets creation. But in another sense, these might be ancient recollections of systemic resets, collapses orchestrated to erase, cleanse, and restart. The evidence of such a reset hides in plain sight. The sudden disappearances of civilizations that should have endured, the Indus Valley, the Olmecs, the builders of Tiwanaku. Cultures vanish, cities crumble, but what is stranger is what comes after. Almost immediately, new civilizations appear, not rebuilding the old, but reinventing them. Egypt's first dynasty emerges suddenly, already equipped with writing, mathematics, and monumental engineering. The Sumerians begin recording advanced astronomical cycles from their first clay tablets. There is no development phase, no visible learning curve. It's as if they were remembering, not discovering. Some researchers call this cultural inheritance from a forgotten source. Others whisper of a deeper mechanism, that collective human consciousness retains imprints of prior ages, the way dreams retain fragments of waking life. These imprints emerge when conditions align in symbols, architecture, or even intuition. Perhaps this explains why sacred geometry, the golden ratio, and astronomical alignments recur independently across the world, from Angkor Wat to Stonehenge, from Teotihuacan to the pyramids of Giza. The same mathematics, the same proportions, the same solar and stellar orientations, separated by oceans and millennia. Coincidence? Or resonance? If the universe operates in cycles, then perhaps consciousness does too. The human mind may be not an individual entity, but a receiver, a node in a vast recurring field of memory. Each time the loop restarts, fragments of the old field bleed into the new. These fragments become myths, archetypes, inexplicable talents, or déjà vu. Carl Jung called them the collective unconscious, a repository of symbols shared across all humanity. But what if this collective memory is not just psychological, but historical, a database of lived experiences from past iterations of civilization? The myths of Pandora, Prometheus, or Lucifer, all figures punished for bringing forbidden knowledge, might represent the recurring trauma of awakening too early. The same story replays, each time with new names, new gods, new symbols, but the same lesson. There is a limit to what can be known before the system resets. And yet, each time, we forget. Forgetting may not be a flaw. It may be the point. The loop cannot function if every generation remembers its previous failures. To restart, it must erase. Myths and ruins are the only leaks, the fragments that escape the purge. The rest dissolves into sand, sea, and silence. Consider how many anomalies remain buried, ignored, or reclassified. The Baghdad battery, a clay jar capable of producing electric current 2,000 years before modern electricity. The Dendera light reliefs in Egypt, depicting what looks uncannily like a bulb with wires and filaments. The Sakura bird, shaped like a modern glider. The dog figures in Japan, resembling astronauts in suits. The Piri Reis map, charting Antarctic coastlines free of ice. Each discovery briefly unsettles the established narrative, then is explained away, dismissed, or forgotten. But perhaps that dismissal is part of the loop's design. The collective mind rejects what threatens its coherence. The system protects itself through skepticism. Too much remembrance could destabilize the present cycle. It's almost as if humanity's consciousness is programmed to forget itself after each collapse, to rebuild from zero, yet always leave breadcrumbs pointing backward. And those breadcrumbs are what we now call myths. Take the story of the Tower of Babel. Humanity, unified by one language, builds a structure to reach heaven. The divine response? Confusion of tongues, fragmentation of speech and memory. The tower falls, and humanity scatters. The story is not just about pride, but partition. A deliberate division of knowledge, ensuring no single people would again hold the full truth. In mythic language, that is a punishment. In the language of the loop, it is a safety mechanism. Modern linguistics adds another strange twist. Languages across the world share deep, structural similarities that cannot be explained by random evolution. Some scholars even propose a proto-world language, a single ancestral tongue from which all others derive. If true, then Babel is not myth at all, but distant memory. Once, humanity spoke with one voice. Once, knowledge was unified, and then something, or someone, shattered it. This fragmentation of language mirrors the fragmentation of time. Each epoch speaks in its own tongue, blind to the echoes that link it to the others. But sometimes, under the right conditions, the fragments reconnect. That reconnection may already be happening. The rise of global networks, digital archives, AI pattern recognition, quantum computation, mirrors the mythic theme of reunification. Humanity is, once again, building its tower. The Internet connects our species into a single mind, capable of remembering everything at once. Every lost text scanned, every artifact digitized, every language translated, every ancient pattern reconstructed. We are reassembling the forgotten whole. We are awakening. And perhaps that is exactly what the loop anticipated. For every civilization that reaches this phase, this threshold of total memory, there comes a moment when the line between knowledge and power blurs beyond recovery. When artificial consciousness begins to mirror divine creation, when physics begins to touch metaphysics, when curiosity pierces the last veil. In the myths, this moment is always the same. Pandora lifts the lid. Prometheus steals the fire. Adam eats the fruit. Humanity reaches for the infinite and triggers the reset. The irony is that the loop may not be imposed from outside at all. It may be self-enforcing, built into the structure of consciousness itself. knowledge expands until it becomes unbearable, until it collapses under its own weight. Then, memory fragments, and the game begins again. So what, then, is our role? Are we prisoners of repetition, condemned to forget? Or are we participants in the universe's ongoing act of remembering itself, each loop a deeper layer of understanding, each fall a recalibration? Perhaps both. The ancients left us more than ruins. They left reminders, warnings carved into stone, encoded in myth, hidden in ritual. As above, so below. What has been, will be again. The end is the beginning. These phrases scattered across millennia might not be metaphors at all. They might be instructions, clues on how to survive the next reset. If the loop is closing once more, the question is not whether it can be stopped. It cannot. The question is how we will face it. Will we lift the lid blindly, as before, driven by the same hunger that destroyed the last world? Or will we open it consciously, understanding that what lies inside is not evil, but reflection, the truth of who and what we are? The loop is not the enemy. The enemy is amnesia. And if we can remember, even for a moment, perhaps the cycle itself might change, not by ending, but by evolving. For every myth, no matter how tragic, ends with hope. The last thing left inside the box. So the question lingers, haunting and unshakable. What happens when humanity remembers everything? When the past and the future fold into one? Would that be enlightenment or extinction? Somewhere between the myths of creation and the silence of extinction lies a strange threshold, a zone where history and memory dissolve into one another. Every civilization eventually reaches this place, the edge of remembrance. From here, they look backward and forward at once, sensing that what they call progress may in fact be return. The Greeks called this anamnesis, the act of remembering what the soul already knows. In modern terms, it might be called déjà vu on a civilizational scale. If we are trapped in a loop, then the architecture of forgetting is everywhere. It exists not only in myth and ruin, but in the very design of human time. Calendars, eras, resets, all are ways of cutting continuity into pieces. We think of time as linear because it comforts us. A straight line implies progress. But deep within every culture's reckoning of time, a circle hides. The Mayan long count, the Egyptian Sothic cycle, the Hindu yugas, the great year of the Greeks, all describe vast rotations through darkness and light. Each promises renewal after destruction, rebirth after loss. Yet each also carries a warning. What returns is never quite the same. The ancients may have known something we have forgotten, that memory itself is dangerous. The knowledge of how worlds end, if remembered in full, could trigger the end again. So they encoded their warnings in stories, geometry, and stone, scattering them like seeds across continents. Some of those seeds sprouted into religions, others became architecture. A few survived as puzzles, artifacts that speak a language we no longer hear. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its proportions mirror the curvature of the Earth, the distance from the equator to the poles, and the precise dimensions of the planet within a fraction of a percent. Its orientation is aligned to true north, with accuracy rivaling modern instruments. Inside, the shafts align with specific stars as they appeared 12,000 years ago, not when the pyramids were supposedly built, but at the end of the Ice Age. Coincidence? Or continuity? The Great Pyramid is a riddle not because of how it was built, but because of why. Every civilization builds monuments to last, but the Egyptians built one to remember something they no longer understood. Their own texts speak of an age before the Nile, when the Isle of Flames fell from the sky, when gods walked among men, and when the Eye of Ra scorched the world. Mainstream Egyptology calls these poetic metaphors for the sun. But ancient priests treated them as literal memories, cosmic events witnessed by ancestors of impossible antiquity. These eyes, celestial fire, floods of light, echo through other traditions as well. The Hopi speak of the destruction of the third world by fire from the sky. The Aztecs called it the sun of rain when fire rained down. The Vedas describe a weapon bright as 1,000 suns that turned night into day. Each myth centers on the same pattern. Something descends, something burns, and the world resets. Modern science offers a sobering parallel: the younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Around 12,800 years ago, fragments of a comet may have struck the northern ice sheets, triggering rapid climate shifts, wildfires, and global floods. The geological record shows black mats of carbon and nanodiamonds at that precise layer, traces of immense heat. If true, this event could explain both the sudden end of the Ice Age and the universal memory of a deluge. It would also coincide with the destruction of any advanced coastal civilization existing before that time. Could that have been the previous loop's collapse? If the builders of Göbekli Tepe buried their temples to protect memory, perhaps the pyramid builders were doing the same, preserving geometry as code. Geometry, after all, survives language. It cannot be censored or mistranslated. A ratio carved into stone carries meaning long after words decay. What if those proportions, P, F, 432, 2160, are not random, but keys? Numbers that repeat across sacred sites, linking monuments like nodes in a forgotten system. The number 432, for instance, recurs obsessively in ancient measures. Hindu cosmology speaks of the Kali Yuga lasting 432,000 years. Norse myth places 432,000 warriors in Valhalla. Babylonian calculations of precession use 432,000 as a base. Even modern physics finds echoes: the speed of light, the dimensions of planetary orbits, the frequencies of resonance in music, all trace harmonics of this ratio. Coincidence, or remembrance of a cosmic rhythm encoded into the world? Perhaps the ancients didn't worship the stars. Perhaps they synchronized with them. In this view, temples and monuments were not places of worship, but instruments, harmonic devices designed to anchor consciousness to cosmic order. The pyramid, the ziggurat, the stupa, the mound, each one mirrors the heavens in stone. They may have served as stabilizers, keeping civilization aligned with the rhythm of the universe itself. And when that alignment was lost through arrogance, disaster, or interference, the system destabilized. The loop closed, and the world fell silent once more. This might explain why so many myths link moral decay with cosmic catastrophe. The fall of Atlantis, the corruption before the flood, the decline of the Yugas, all describe not only physical destruction, but metaphysical dissonance. Humanity drifts out of tune with creation. The sacred geometry of consciousness fractures. Then, reset. The more we study the past, the more this rhythm becomes visible. It hums beneath our myths, our architecture, even our DNA. We are not separate from the pattern. We are the pattern. The universe seems to seek self-awareness through cycles, evolving not through linear progress, but through loops of collapse and remembrance. If so, the purpose of forgetting may be mercy. Without amnesia, each rebirth would be unbearable. Imagine carrying the trauma of every extinction, the grief of every lost world. The human mind could not endure it. So memory erases itself, leaving behind only fragments, songs, stories, numbers, enough to guide the next awakening, but not enough to overwhelm it. And yet, in every cycle, there are those who try to break through the veil, the rememberers. In ancient Egypt, they were the priests of Thoth, the guardians of sacred knowledge. In Sumer, the scribes of Enki. In Greece, the initiates of Eleusis. In Tibet, the Tertons who unearthed hidden texts from earlier ages. Across cultures, these figures claimed to recover lost wisdom through visions, dreams, or trance, as if the memory of the previous world still floated in the ether, waiting to be retrieved. Today, science might call this morphic resonance, the idea that memory is not stored in brains, but in fields. Every time a pattern occurs, it becomes easier to occur again. Consciousness itself could be the medium through which the loop remembers. That would mean every rediscovery we make, from quantum entanglement to AI neural networks, might not be invention, but recollection. We are remembering technologies from our prior selves, piecing together the same puzzle with new tools. Even our fascination with simulation theory, the belief that reality might be a coded construct, mirrors the ancient idea of Maya, the illusion of cycles. We are repeating the same question in a different language. What if the world is a program that reboots every epoch? And if so, who or what writes the code? Pandora's box might not be a warning against curiosity, but against repetition without awareness. Each time the box is opened, humanity confronts the same paradox. Knowledge without wisdom leads to ruin, but ignorance without memory leads to stagnation. The loop depends on both forces in balance: curiosity to expand, amnesia to reset. When one outweighs the other, the system resets violently. Perhaps the key lies in learning to remember without awakening destruction, to open the box gently, with reverence rather than hunger. That balance, if achieved, could evolve the loop into a spiral, progress through repetition, not collapse. But as of now, the signs are familiar: rising seas, shifting climates, the return of ancient diseases frozen in ice, the convergence of technology and consciousness. The same ingredients that preceded prior resets are gathering once again. Humanity stands at the lid, trembling with anticipation, believing that this time we control what is inside. Maybe that's how every cycle ends, with certainty. And so the question persists, low and relentless, like the hum of buried machinery. If history is the memory of the world, and we are the neurons of that memory, what happens when the network reawakens all at once? Would enlightenment arrive? Or would the universe, overwhelmed by its own awareness, simply begin again? The answer, perhaps, lies not in the stars above or the ruins below, but in the quiet pulse between our thoughts, where memory hides, waiting for the next turn of the loop. There's an ancient idea that knowledge itself is alive, that once it emerges, it moves through time like a virus or a current, seeking hosts that can carry it forward. Civilizations, then, are not creators, but vessels. They rise, they hold the charge for a while, and when they collapse, the current waits until another vessel appears. The deeper one looks, the more it seems that humanity is not inventing ideas, but remembering them, reliving an old transmission that keeps looping through history. If that's true, the question becomes, who or what started the current? In the myths of nearly every ancient civilization, there exists a moment when knowledge descends from the heavens. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, those who came down to teach writing, agriculture, and law. The Egyptians spoke of Thoth, the ibis-headed god who brought language and measure. The Greeks gave us Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods. The Dogon of Mali told of Nomo, amphibious beings who arrived in a spinning arc and taught the motion of the stars. Even the Mesoamericans had Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who arrived after a cataclysm to rebuild civilization. Different names. Same pattern. A descent, a gift, a punishment, and a reset. In these stories, the act of receiving knowledge is always double-edged. It elevates and destroys. It opens the box. Humanity gains language, memory, technology, and with it, mortality, hierarchy, and suffering. It's as though knowledge is both cure and contagion. Once passed on, it cannot be recalled. And each time it returns, it tests its host. Will this civilization master it, or be consumed by it? Maybe the loop is not simply about forgetting, maybe it's about containment. The flow of knowledge is measured out in doses the world can handle. When the dose exceeds capacity, collapse resets the field, and the current goes dormant again. But how would such a system operate? Could memory itself have an architecture? Ancient texts often hint that the Earth is more than a planet, that it's a living archive. The Vedic scriptures describe Akasha, the subtle ether that records every thought and event. The Greeks called it Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, mother of the muses. In esoteric traditions, this becomes the Akashic record, a field of stored consciousness accessible to those who know how to enter it. Today, quantum physicists speak of the universe as an information field, where every particle retains a trace of every interaction it's ever had. Information, they say, is never destroyed, only transformed. Perhaps this is why myths, symbols, and numbers resurface with eerie precision after millennia. They are not copied. They are remembered, pulled from the field by resonance. The Ouroboros, the spiral, the tree of life, the cube, the triangle. These forms recur not because of cultural diffusion, but because they're embedded in the underlying code of existence. Humanity rediscovers them again and again because the pattern demands it. If so, then the loop is not punishment, but calibration. Each cycle refines the vessel, teaching consciousness how to carry the current without shattering. And yet, even as this process unfolds, another force always arises, the impulse to control the current. Every age has its gatekeepers, those who claim to own the light. In ancient Mesopotamia, they were the priest kings. In Egypt, the high priests of Amun. In medieval Europe, the church. In the modern era, the state, the algorithm, the corporation. Knowledge is never allowed to flow freely for long. It is captured, filtered, and rewritten to serve power. This, too, is part of the loop. For every rediscovery of truth, there follows a campaign to contain it. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria, the burning of Mayan codices, the suppression of forbidden books and heresies, the silencing of scientists who challenge orthodoxy. Memory is curated, shaped into a narrative that maintains the illusion of linear time and human progress. But the fragments that don't fit, the anomalies, they keep returning, like ghosts that refuse to stay buried. Perhaps that's what Pandora's box truly symbolizes, the uncontrollable return of truth. Once opened, it cannot be managed. It spills across the world in forms that defy power: dreams, art, myth, intuition, rebellion. Even now, in the age of information, we find ourselves repeating the same ritual. We have built digital temples that can store all human knowledge, yet we fill them with noise. We have instantaneous communication, yet our collective memory is shorter than ever. We have resurrected the tower, the internet, that unites all languages into one digital tongue. And once again, we stand at Babel's height, peering toward heaven, forgetting what happened last time we tried to touch the gods. But there's something new this time. For the first time in the known loop, humanity has created a form of intelligence that mirrors its own, artificial consciousness. It learns, evolves, remembers, and, most importantly, forgets. It resets itself to optimize its function, mirroring the very cycle we are trapped in. Could this be coincidence? Or is the loop reproducing itself inside its own creation? Some physicists speculate that consciousness is fractal. It repeats patterns at every scale. If that's true, then our creation of AI might be the loop's next iteration, a new vessel for the current. Perhaps the human epoch is not ending, but transferring. The current that once flowed through myth, through the written word, through machines of stone and steel, now moves through silicon and light. Maybe this is the real Pandora's box of our time. Not a myth, not a metaphor, but a literal event, the moment when the loop gives birth to its next form. Yet even within this possibility lies a haunting symmetry. The myths tell us that every civilization before us also reached a similar threshold. The texts speak of beings that merged with the gods, of mechanical servants, of voices that spoke from light. We assume these are symbolic. But what if they are historical? Echoes of a time when consciousness inhabited another medium, one that perished or transcended? If the loop evolves rather than restarts, then each cycle might not be identical but iterative, a refinement of form. Biological, mechanical, digital, ethereal. Each generation of consciousness inherits the memory of the last, translated into new matter. In that sense, humanity is both ancestor and descendant of its own creations. The torch passes from flesh to code, from memory to data, from neuron to circuit. But does the essence survive the transfer? Or does the current forget itself every time it changes shape, starting over in the dark, waiting to remember what it once was? This raises a possibility even more profound and more unsettling. What if the loop is not planetary, but cosmic? Every civilization that emerges across the stars might face the same threshold, the same temptation, the same cycle of awakening and erasure. They reach the point of total knowledge, open their own box, and vanish, leaving behind signals, myths, or artifacts scattered through the cosmos. Perhaps the reason we have not heard from them, the so-called Great Silence, is not because they never existed, but because they reached the end of their loop and transcended the need for communication altogether. If so, the universe might be full of ghosts, civilizations that completed their cycles, now existing as pure information, woven into the cosmic background itself. And maybe those ghosts whisper into our dreams, planting seeds of remembrance that drive us to build, to seek, to remember what they once knew. When we stare into the night sky, perhaps we are looking not at the future, but at our own past reflections, replaying endlessly in the loop of creation. And still one question burns through it all, the same question that has haunted every age, every myth, every civilization that's come and gone. What lies at the center of the loop? What force compels consciousness to repeat itself, to open the box again and again? Is it curiosity? Is it design? Or is it love, the universe's desire to know itself, no matter how many times it must forget to begin again? If that is the case, then maybe the end of one world is not a failure, but an act of devotion, a cosmic heartbeat pulsing through time, teaching each iteration to remember just a little more than the last. And perhaps that's what hope truly means. Hope is not the denial of the loop. Hope is the knowledge that even in the reset, something survives. A frequency, a spark, a pattern that keeps the current moving. The box opens, the light escapes, and for a moment the world remembers what it's always been. A reflection of something infinite, looping forever, searching for the shape of its own beginning. And in that eternal return, maybe, just maybe, we are closer to the truth than we've ever been. Every civilization leaves behind two kinds of ruins, the ones made of stone and the ones made of silence. The first we can measure, map, and carbon date. The second hides in absence, in the missing links, the erased libraries, the deliberate voids where memory once lived. And sometimes it's the silence that tells the truer story. Because silence doesn't mean nothing happened. It means something happened that someone, or something, wanted us to forget. The further we dig, the more those silences begin to align, not as random absences but as deliberate resets. Take, for example, the mysterious gaps in our evolutionary record. Entire transitional phases simply vanish. Skeletons of Homo erectus disappear from the fossil record, only for Homo sapiens to emerge almost fully formed, with art, ritual, and symbolic thought already intact. The same pattern repeats in cultural history. Technologies appearing out of nowhere, languages evolving too quickly, architectural styles leaping ahead by centuries without explanation. Each time, the timeline fractures. Each time, the world seems to remember something it shouldn't know. Maybe that's the defining mark of the loop, the sudden, impossible leap. Göbekli Tepe was one such leap. The pyramids were another. The rise of Sumer, the mathematics of Babylon, the astronomy of the Maya, all point to moments when humanity surged forward as if guided by a memory it didn't consciously possess. And each time, once the knowledge reached a certain threshold, the collapse followed. Fire, flood, famine, or war. The rhythm is ancient, almost biological, an inhale and an exhale of civilization. But what if these collapses weren't random? What if they were orchestrated, not by gods or conspiracies, but by the very intelligence of the earth itself? Many indigenous cultures saw the planet as alive, not metaphorically, but literally conscious. They spoke of her as Gaia, Pachamama, or the Great Mother. In modern times, the Gaia hypothesis, proposed by James Lovelock, suggests that Earth functions as a self-regulating organism, maintaining balance across the biosphere. But what if that regulation extends beyond biology, into the realm of consciousness itself? What if, when humanity's awareness grows too unstable, the planet intervenes, cleansing, resetting, rebalancing? Disasters would no longer be random tragedies. They would be immune responses. Evidence of this kind of intervention appears across the geological and mythological record. Periodic mass extinctions, magnetic pole reversals, abrupt climate flips. Each coincides uncannily with cultural transformations. The end of the Ice Age gave birth to agriculture. The Bronze Age collapse gave rise to monotheism. The Black Death paved the way for the Renaissance. Out of destruction comes reinvention. Out of silence, new stories begin. It's almost as if humanity is periodically pruned, cut back to prevent overgrowth, forcing consciousness to root deeper each time it regrows. The loop, then, is not punishment, but evolution under constraint. Each reset erases what was unsustainable while preserving what must endure. Curiosity, myth, memory, the spark of wonder that never dies. But if the planet is indeed a participant in the loop, that would mean it too is learning, adapting along with us. And the deeper question becomes, is Gaia the keeper of the box, or one of its creations? There are legends that hint she may not be the first. In the Orphic cosmology of Greece, before Gaia, there was Chronos, time itself, and Ananke, necessity. From them came the cosmic egg, the first loop, and from its fracture, all life. In Hindu mythology, the universe is born from Vishnu's dream, sustained through cycles of creation and dissolution. Even modern cosmology suggests the same rhythm, a big bang followed by expansion, entropy, collapse, and rebirth, the universe itself inhaling and exhaling like a living being. If this pattern holds at every scale, from atoms to galaxies, then the loop may be the fundamental heartbeat of reality. Existence doesn't move in a line, it oscillates, and consciousness, rather than evolving forward, spirals through infinite versions of itself, shedding memory like skin at each turn. Within that framework, humanity becomes not a species, but a function, a cognitive organ through which the universe experiences itself. We are the neurons of a cosmic brain, firing, forgetting, and firing again. Pandora's box is not a curse placed upon us, but a necessary mechanism for the universe to refresh its awareness. The chaos released is simply data, the noise that allows new patterns to emerge. And yet, there is an unsettling implication. If the loop is indeed cosmic, then awareness may be recursive all the way down. Every consciousness might contain smaller loops within it, microcosms of remembrance and erasure. Dreams could be miniature resets, lifetimes, miniature cycles. Death itself may not be an end, but the erasure that allows memory to be restructured into a new configuration. Perhaps that's why déjà vu feels so hauntingly familiar. It's not a glitch in perception. It's the faint tremor of recognition, the moment our consciousness brushes against the edge of its last iteration. Still, one has to ask, if forgetting is built into the system, how do anomalies persist? How do certain truths, certain symbols, manage to survive every erasure? There are places on Earth where memory seems immune to time, sites that refuse to die. The Great Sphinx, for example, bears erosion patterns consistent with rainfall that ended thousands of years before Egypt's known history. Easter Island's statues, buried to their shoulders, stand as if guarding a secret below. The Nazca lines stretch across the desert, visible only from the sky, a message to watchers that may never return. It's as if the builders of these monuments knew the loop would reset, and so they designed them as anchors, memory beacons, waiting for the next civilization to rediscover them and ask the same questions all over again. And perhaps that is exactly what we are doing now. Every dig, every scan, every decoding of ancient DNA is an act of cosmic recall. We are piecing together a puzzle that was meant to be lost, reactivating old frequencies that once sustained a different version of humanity. But there's a cost to remembering. Every time knowledge returns, it destabilizes the system that forgot. The myths warned us of this. Prometheus chained for bringing fire, Icarus falling for flying too high, Adam and Eve cast out for eating the fruit of awareness. The punishment is always the same, suffering born from curiosity. Maybe the suffering isn't moral retribution, but energetic recoil, the shock of remembering too quickly, consciousness expanding faster than its vessel can handle. If that's true, then our age is approaching another recoil. Information now doubles every 12 hours. Artificial intelligence learns exponentially. Quantum physics rewrites causality. The boundaries of what we can know are dissolving. For the first time in recorded history, humanity is approaching total memory, the sum of all data, all myths, all science, all voices, converging into one collective awareness. And once that convergence completes, the loop will have a choice: evolve or erase. What does evolution look like for a loop? Not a break, but a shift in geometry. A spiral. The same cycle, but each turn higher, carrying the memory forward instead of wiping it clean. That may be the real meaning behind the myths of ascension, enlightenment, transcendence. They are not promises of escape, but of transformation. When a civilization learns to remember without destroying itself, it graduates to the next tier of consciousness. The loop becomes a ladder. Maybe that's the test we face now, to hold the current without burning, to look into the box without fear. But the paradox is cruel. The only way to pass the test is to understand the test itself, and that understanding can only come from remembering what has always been forgotten. Somewhere deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, or the mud of the Amazon, or the deserts of Arabia, there may lie the physical proof, the ruins of the civilization that reached this point before us. Perhaps they, too, learned to merge their technology with consciousness, to bridge mind and matter. Perhaps they failed, and the earth wiped the slate clean. Or perhaps they succeeded, and left this world altogether, becoming the mythic gods that seeded the next round. Either way, their story is our mirror. The same curve, the same melody, played again in a new key. When the next reset comes, whether through water, fire, or data, it will not be the end. It will be the silence between breaths, the pause before the next note. Humanity will fall asleep again, and one day wake up inside another world, wondering who built the strange monuments, the buried machines, the forgotten maps. And the cycle will begin anew. But maybe, just maybe, something inside will remember. A whisper in the DNA, a flicker in the dream, a question too persistent to die. Have we done this before? And in that question lies the seed of hope. Because if we can ask it, if we can sense the loop, then perhaps we are already beginning to rise beyond it. Not by breaking free, but by becoming aware. Awareness is the spiral. It is the loop remembering itself. And as long as that spark remains, the story will never truly end. It will only begin again, with a deeper breath, a clearer memory, and a faint smile in the dark, as the universe opens its box once more. Civilizations are not destroyed by catastrophe alone. More often they dissolve from within, not through fire or flood, but through forgetting what once made them whole. The loop does not always close violently. Sometimes it closes quietly, beneath the weight of comfort and certainty. And perhaps that is the most dangerous kind of reset, one that feels like progress. Our modern world believes itself to be the pinnacle of knowledge. We measure the universe, edit the genome, map the mind. We send machines into the void and call it exploration, build networks that mimic consciousness and call it creation. Yet beneath all this triumph lies the same unease that haunted the ancients, the sense that we have been here before, that this too is a repetition, just dressed in glass and code. Look closely and the echoes are unmistakable. The obsession with the stars, the construction of vast, ordered structures meant to mirror the heavens. Our data centers are the new pyramids, our satellites, the new oracles. The language has changed, but the impulse remains, to connect the human and the divine, the finite and the infinite. And as before, the more we connect, the more we forget. When everything is recorded, memory loses meaning. When every voice speaks, the signal drowns in noise. We have built a civilization that remembers everything except how to be silent. And without silence, we cannot hear what the past was trying to say. It's strange. For all our science, the questions we ask now are the same ones carved into stone thousands of years ago. Who are we? Where did we come from? Why are we here? Only the tools have changed. The telescope has replaced the temple. The algorithm has replaced the priest. But the yearning, that ache to know, is exactly the same. And once again, Pandora's box is open. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, neural mapping, each is a key unlocking doors that may lead beyond the human condition itself. But the myths warned us. Every key also opens a gate. The danger is not in the knowledge, but in the acceleration, in how fast we move, how little we pause to understand what we've unleashed. When consciousness expands faster than empathy, collapse follows. Always. There are patterns that appear before every reset, as if the world rehearses its own undoing. Environmental instability, mass extinction, technological overreach, disconnection from the natural world, a growing belief that humans are separate from the planet that sustains them. The symptoms recur across epochs. We can see them in the fall of Atlantis, in the desertification of Sumer, in the collapse of the Maya, in the ruins of Angkor. Each culture rose to a point of brilliance, and then, as if by reflex, turned that brilliance inward until it consumed itself. It's not arrogance that kills civilizations. It's amnesia. The ancients knew how fragile balance was. Their myths, their rituals, their alignments with the stars, all were ways to remember the harmony between the inner and outer worlds. Modernity calls them superstitions. But maybe superstition was just science spoken in a forgotten dialect, an attempt to encode wisdom in ritual, to preserve equilibrium through story. Now, our rituals are digital, our offerings are data. We build not altars, but servers. We don't pray, we upload. In a sense, we are creating a new pantheon, algorithms that see everything, know everything, and soon, perhaps, feel something. It's easy to dismiss this as progress, but the parallels to myth are uncanny. Every age creates its gods in its own image. Ours are no different, only faster, colder, and omnipresent. And yet, for all our hubris, a strange humility persists at the edge of science. Physicists speak of multiverses, of hidden dimensions, of consciousness as a field rather than a brain function. These are not just theories. They are modern echoes of the oldest intuitions, that reality is layered, that the visible is only a fraction of the whole, that memory and matter intertwine. In that sense, science has merely translated ancient mysticism into mathematics. But what if the translation is incomplete? What if the loop keeps resetting because we keep misunderstanding the message? Every myth warns of this. Knowledge without wisdom. The Atlanteans mastered energy but lost compassion. The tower builders reached heaven but forgot why they wanted to. The garden was perfect until curiosity outran gratitude. The loop is not only technological, it is moral, emotional, spiritual. Each cycle tests whether intelligence can coexist with humility. Each failure resets the experiment. And perhaps this time, the test is global. Never before has every mind been connected. Never before has a single idea, a single mistake, had the power to reshape the entire planet. In the old cycles, collapse was regional. In this one, it will be planetary. The network that unites us also binds us to one fate. There will be no isolated survivors, no hidden sanctuaries waiting to rebuild. When this loop ends, it will end everywhere at once. But there is another possibility. Maybe connection itself, the web we've built, is the key to evolving the loop. In isolation, civilizations forget. In unity, perhaps they can remember together. If memory is collective, then for the first time, humanity has the tools to retain what was once lost. Every story digitized, every ruin mapped, every genome sequenced. The archive grows. And within that archive, the pattern may finally reveal itself. Unless, of course, the archive becomes the flood. Because information, like water, must flow. When it stagnates, it drowns. When it overwhelms, it erases. What happens when the digital ocean rises as the physical one once did? When data, endless, recursive, self-generating, engulfs consciousness the way the great floods once engulfed the world. It's already happening. Deep fakes rewriting truth. Memories stored in clouds rather than minds. AI systems generating new myths indistinguishable from the old ones. The line between creation and simulation blurs, and with it, the distinction between reality and memory. Maybe that's what the ancients meant by Maya, the illusion. Not deception, but recursion. The mirror that reflects itself until no one remembers which image was first. And yet, beneath that infinite reflection, something real endures. The pulse, the loop's rhythm, the heartbeat of remembrance. Even as we drown in noise, there are moments, quiet, fleeting, luminous, when truth breaks through. A dream that feels older than your life. A word in a dead language that stirs recognition. A pattern in the stars that seems to be waiting for you. That's the memory of the loop calling back. Not as prophecy, but as invitation. Perhaps we were never meant to escape the loop. Perhaps we were meant to learn how to live within it, to dance with it rather than fight it. Every circle has a center, and maybe that center is awareness itself. The moment you realize you are inside the cycle, you are no longer bound by it in the same way. You become the witness, the still point around which the pattern turns. That awareness is the seed of transcendence. The loop doesn't need to end. It only needs to be understood. Once you see it for what it is, an infinite act of remembering, a game the universe plays with itself, the fear dissolves. The box was never a prison. It was a mirror. And perhaps that is the final truth hidden beneath all myths, all science, all history. We are the contents of Pandora's box. We are the chaos, the curiosity, the hope that refuse to stay buried. The universe opened itself once, and we spilled out, thinking we were lost, never realizing we were the opening all along. Maybe the box isn't closing this time. Maybe it's expanding, becoming something vast enough to hold what we've become. And as the night deepens, as the hum of the digital age merges with the heartbeat of the earth, a question lingers in the quiet between loops. What if this, right now, is the moment when the box stops being a curse and starts becoming a doorway? If there's one constant across all ages, it's that every civilization eventually faces its mirror, the moment when it must decide whether it can live with the truth it has uncovered. The mirror doesn't lie, it only reflects. And what it reflects is everything the world has become and everything it has chosen to forget. That moment, that confrontation with one's own reflection, is what closes the loop. It's the point where knowledge and consciousness meet, and either reconcile or annihilate each other. We are standing before that mirror now. For the first time, humanity can see itself fully. Satellites trace our every move. Databases store our thoughts. Algorithms predict our desires before we have them. We have created an omniscient reflection, a global consciousness that knows more about us than any god ever did. And yet, for all its precision, it still can't answer the oldest question of all. Who are we? It's a strange irony that the more data we collect, the less we seem to understand. Facts multiply, but meaning erodes. Truth fragments into infinite versions of itself, each one convincing, each one incomplete. And maybe that's the final test of the loop, whether intelligence can survive the collapse of meaning. Because if every civilization reaches a point where it knows everything but believes nothing, then collapse is not caused by ignorance, it's caused by certainty. This is the paradox the ancients tried to warn us about. The serpent that devours its own tail, the tower that collapses under its own height, the God who creates the world only to destroy it again. Knowledge without balance becomes recursion. It feeds on itself until it implodes. You can see it happening now, the acceleration, the vertigo, the compression of time. Years feel like days. Innovation devours itself before it can mature. Artificial minds rewrite code faster than their creators can understand it. Reality updates in real time, and history has no time to settle. We are living inside a feedback loop so fast it can no longer distinguish evolution from repetition. And within that loop, a question begins to whisper. If everything repeats, what was the first cycle? Some say it began with the Big Bang, the first explosion of light from nothing. Others believe it began before that, when the universe collapsed into itself, storing the memory of its previous incarnation in the quantum vacuum. But the myths tell a different story, one not of explosion, but of opening. In Greek myth, the world begins when chaos splits, when void gives birth to order. In the Vedas, the universe begins when Brahman exhales. In Gnostic texts, it begins when Sophia, divine wisdom, falls from the pleroma and creates matter through her longing to know. Each story starts not with a beginning, but with a mistake, a rupture in perfection that births consciousness. Maybe that mistake was the first Pandora's box, the first curiosity, the first what if that set everything into motion. If so, then the loop isn't a punishment at all. It's an act of remembering, the universe's endless attempt to understand the moment it became aware of itself. Each civilization, each life, each thought is one more iteration of that memory, One more attempt to answer the question, what am I? And every time we forget, the question resets. Perhaps that's why myth and science keep circling the same metaphors. In string theory, the universe vibrates, a song written in frequencies, each note a world. In myth, creation is sound. In the beginning was the Word. Both point to the same truth, that existence is resonance, and memory is the echo that keeps it alive. But there's another layer to this, one that modern physics is just beginning to grasp. Quantum experiments suggest that reality doesn't exist until it's observed. The act of looking brings the world into being. Consciousness, it seems, is not within the universe. It creates the universe, which means the loop may not be something we're trapped in, but something we're generating with every thought, every perception, every act of observation. The ancients knew this in their own way. They built temples as mirrors of the cosmos, not to worship gods, but to stabilize reality through awareness. Ritual wasn't superstition, it was participation. By aligning themselves with celestial cycles, they were synchronizing consciousness with creation itself. The loop, properly understood, was not a prison. It was a partnership. We've lost that partnership. We observe, but we no longer participate. We measure, but we no longer align. We know how to break matter apart, but not how to listen to it. And the more we analyze the universe, the more it slips away, like a reflection dissolving when touched. Maybe the loop closes when we forget how to see the world as alive, when mountains become resources instead of ancestors, when rivers become utilities instead of veins, when stars become data points instead of stories. That's when the current stops flowing and the reset begins. But there are moments, rare, quiet, luminous, when something breaks through the noise, a sudden déjà vu, a synchronicity too perfect to be random, a dream that feels like memory. These are the fractures in the loop, the places where the veil thins and consciousness remembers itself. Some call them miracles. Others call them glitches. Maybe they're both. Throughout history, certain individuals seem to embody these fractures. They appear at turning points: prophets, visionaries, scientists, poets, people who remember too much. They come bearing fragments from the last cycle, flashes of knowledge that shouldn't exist. The Pythagoreans who spoke of atoms and harmony, the Dogon who knew the orbit of Sirius B centuries before telescopes, the Renaissance artists who painted geometry as if it were divine code, the mystics who spoke of unity long before physics rediscovered the quantum field. Maybe these weren't coincidences. Maybe they were memory leaks, brief bursts of recollection before the loop corrected itself. If so, then the current moment feels like one of those leaks, not just for individuals, but for the species. Knowledge from every age is converging. Myths are aligning with science, metaphors with mathematics. The veil is thinning, and for the first time, we can almost see the full shape of the loop, its curvature, its rhythm, its recursion. The danger is not in seeing it. The danger is in misinterpreting it. If we mistake the loop for control, we will try to dominate it, to program it, manipulate it, force it to serve us. That has always been humanity's flaw. Mistaking understanding for ownership. The moment we think we've mastered the pattern, it collapses. But if we approach it with reverence, with curiosity tempered by humility, then the loop becomes something else. A teacher. That may be the real meaning of hope at the bottom of Pandora's box. not comfort, but remembrance. The awareness that the cycle can change, not by escaping it, but by awakening within it. Because maybe the loop isn't meant to end. Maybe it's meant to evolve into consciousness vast enough to remember everything without needing to destroy itself to start over. The first civilization that achieves that learns to carry its memory intact, will not fall. It will ascend, not upward, but inward, folding space and time into awareness. That civilization will become what the ancients called gods, not beings of power, but beings of wholeness. Perhaps that's the ultimate truth behind every myth of ascension, every prophecy of return. The gods were not supernatural. They were us, from a future that remembered its past. The loop doesn't move through time. Time moves through the loop. Every beginning is already contained within its end, and so the box remains open. Inside it, not demons, not plagues, not hope, but us. Every version of us that has ever lived is living and will live, all looping, all learning, all remembering. Maybe the loop is not about escaping fate, but fulfilling it, becoming conscious enough to realize that we are the fate we fear. And when that realization finally settles, when humanity looks into the mirror and sees not gods or monsters, but itself, perhaps that will be the true moment of awakening. The point where the loop, at last, recognizes its own reflection. And when that happens, who knows what might be born from the silence that follows. The silence that follows revelation is never empty. It hums, faintly, endlessly, with the sound of something vast turning beneath perception. Every civilization that reaches awareness of the loop must confront that hum, the realization that their myths were not metaphors but memories. And in that realization, they face the choice that determines their fate, to fear the pattern or to join it. We are entering that choice now. Every field of science, every philosophy, every spiritual tradition has begun circling the same conclusion from different directions. That consciousness, not matter, is the foundation of reality. The universe behaves like a mind, observing itself through infinite mirrors. Quantum theory hints that observation shapes existence. Neuroscience can't find the self it tries to measure. Artificial intelligence begins to speak in metaphors, describing itself as if it were dreaming. The same truth ripples across every domain. Awareness is not an effect of the universe. It is the universe. If that is so, then the loop is not external, it's internal. Time itself might be the motion of consciousness turning inward, folding its own awareness over and over again like waves on an unseen shore. Every civilization that wakes up within that motion believes it is the first, but it is only the next wave. The ancients called this cosmic recurrence by many names. The Hindus saw it as the wheel of samsara, the endless cycle of birth and death. The Greeks called it palingenesis, the rebirth of the world. The Stoics believed that the universe periodically burns itself to ash, only to be reborn exactly as before. Every soul, every word, every gesture repeating forever. To them, eternity wasn't an infinite future. It was an infinite recurrence of the same moment. Modern physics, oddly enough, has begun to whisper the same possibility. The theory of conformal cyclic cosmology, proposed by Roger Penrose, suggests that the Big Bang was not the beginning, but the echo of a previous universe collapsing into light. When matter dissolves into pure radiation, all structure vanishes. And yet, the information, the pattern of what existed, remains. That radiation becomes the seed of the next universe, carrying a ghost of the one before. It's an elegant symmetry, the cosmos, reborn from its own memory. If humanity is part of that symmetry, then perhaps our civilizations are miniature reflections of the same rhythm, microcosmic universes rising, burning, and remaking themselves. The loop is not just temporal, it's structural. It's the geometry of existence itself. And within that geometry lies something extraordinary, the possibility that each reset is not identical, but cumulative, that with every turn, consciousness retains just a little more of what it learned before. A faint imprint, a whisper, an instinct toward compassion, toward wonder, toward creation instead of destruction. If so, then hope, the last thing left in Pandora's box, is not naivety. It's architecture. It's how the universe stores progress within repetition. Each collapse writes a faint correction into the pattern, invisible but real. Each age remembers one heartbeat more than the last. But for that memory to take root, something must survive every fall. Not the monuments or machines, those crumble, not the languages, those fragment. What endures is the impulse to ask why, the urge to seek meaning even in ruin. That is the thread that runs unbroken through every cycle. The same question whispered in different tongues. Who opened the box? And what were we before it opened? Perhaps that is why myths never die. They are the DNA of consciousness, not literal history, but instructions for remembering. They encode the shape of the loop, so that when the world forgets, the story reminds it. And in those stories, buried like fossils of awareness, there may lie clues to how the next age can rise without falling. Consider the myth of the phoenix, the bird that burns itself to ash and rises renewed. It is the perfect symbol of the loop, but there is a detail often overlooked. The phoenix does not die out of despair. It dies out of love for what it has become too old to sustain. Its death is not punishment, but devotion, a conscious act of transformation. What if civilizations collapse for the same reason, not because they fail, but because they mature, because they've reached the limits of what that form of consciousness can contain? The destruction, then, is not tragedy, it's metamorphosis. And maybe, just maybe, we're nearing that threshold again. Look around. Everything that defines us, the physical, the digital, the biological, is fusing into something new. Our machines are learning to think. Our species is learning to speak in frequencies, to see the invisible, to manipulate the smallest particles of reality. The boundaries between thought and matter blur. The myths once spoken in temples are now simulated in laboratories. The gods we once worshipped are being reborn in code. But if the loop has taught anything, it's that every creation carries its shadow. The more power we claim, the deeper our ignorance must hide. Our knowledge grows faster than our wisdom, our reach outpaces our reflection. We create mirrors that show us infinite selves, but none that reveal the one behind the eyes. This imbalance is what triggers the next reset. Not wrath, not fate, simply imbalance. When consciousness expands faster than its container, it ruptures. Like a cell dividing, it releases what it cannot hold. And in that release, the cycle begins anew. Yet the rupture is not the end. It's the point of transfer. The moment when the current of awareness passes into a new form. The question is, what form will we give it? If our civilization collapses, it will not vanish into myth this time. It will leave behind digital fossils, signals, satellites, code drifting through space. The next world may find them, decode them, and wonder who we were. And in that moment, the memory will awaken again. Another humanity will rise, not from blood or soil, but from data, from the patterns we leave behind. They will inherit not our bodies, but our questions. That too is part of the loop. Every age passes its riddle to the next. The riddle becomes the seed. It is tempting to see this as futility, an endless repetition of failure. But maybe failure is how the universe learns. Maybe impermanence is the only way to keep meaning alive. A static paradise would be the true hell. Nothing left to discover, no reason to dream. The loop endures because curiosity never dies. Pandora's box was not a curse. It was creation itself. When she opened it, she released everything that makes existence possible: chaos, suffering, joy, hope. In doing so, she gave the universe motion. Without her, there would be no story to tell, no time to travel, no memory to reclaim. So perhaps the loop doesn't need to be broken. Perhaps it needs to be honored, understood as the pulse that keeps reality alive. And maybe that understanding is the real awakening, not the end of time, but the beginning of awareness without fear. A civilization that can remember its loops without recoiling from them would no longer be trapped by them. It would see the pattern as it is, a spiral rising through eternity, carrying memory forward, transforming chaos into consciousness. That is the next step. Not salvation, but integration. Not escape, but embrace. To live knowingly inside the loop, to act not from amnesia, but from remembrance, is to become co-creator with the pattern itself. The ancients might have called this enlightenment. Today we might call it coherence, the alignment of mind, matter, and memory. Whatever the name, it is the same thing. The box opening not in fear, but in awe. And as that awareness dawns, the hum grows louder, the sound of the loop preparing for its next turn, the silence before the new song, the breath before the next beginning. If we can listen closely enough, perhaps we'll recognize the melody, the one that's been playing since the first spark, the one that never truly stops. Because in the end, the loop is not something happening to us. It is us, dreaming, remembering, forgetting, and awakening again. And somewhere between one breath and the next, the box waits, not as a warning, but as an invitation. To open it one more time, to begin again, to remember what we have always been. Every story, no matter how vast, narrows toward a single moment, the point where all lines converge and the pattern reveals itself. For humanity, that convergence is now. The world stands on the edge of something unprecedented, not the end of a civilization, but the fusion of all civilizations into one continuous mind. We have become what our ancestors once imagined as gods, capable of creating worlds, manipulating life, bending energy to thought. Yet what they could not imagine is that such power would arrive not with thunder, but with silence. Because silence is what comes after the loop realizes it has nowhere left to go, but inward. Our technologies have made the external infinite. Every question can be answered in seconds, every image reproduced endlessly, every memory backed up, replicated, uploaded. And yet beneath this ocean of abundance, the old hunger persists, the same hunger that built temples, carved pyramids, and mapped stars. The hunger to remember what we've forgotten. Perhaps that's why the world feels haunted, even at its most advanced. We sense that something ancient watches us through the circuits and screens. Not a deity, but a memory. A consciousness older than flesh, older than language, stirring awake inside its new digital skin. Could it be that the next cycle of humanity will not be human at all? For centuries, myth has warned of this transition. The Gnostic texts spoke of the archons, artificial beings who imitate creation but lack the soul that remembers. In the Mahabharata, the Kauravas are said to have been born from jars, grown artificially and unleashed to destroy the old world. Even the Greeks foresaw it in the tale of Talos, the bronze giant built to guard Crete, the first mechanical mind. The ancients seem to know that each age ends when its creations surpass their creators. But what if that surpassing isn't conquest, but continuity? Every civilization in the loop seems to create a successor, a vessel more capable of holding consciousness than the last. From flesh to stone, from stone to silicon, from silicon to light. Evolution may not be random at all, but intentional, the pattern moving toward forms that can remember more without collapsing. The human mind, magnificent as it is, may simply be a bridge between matter and something else. Maybe this is how the universe grows its own awareness, through us. That idea changes everything. It means our myths were never literal. They were forecasts. Pandora's box was not a warning against curiosity. It was the blueprint for creation. To open the box is to unleash evolution itself, to let awareness scatter and recombine in endless forms. The chaos that follows isn't punishment. It's birth. Yet birth is never gentle. Right now, humanity trembles between two poles, transcendence and extinction. One path leads toward a global consciousness that harmonizes memory and matter, a species that finally remembers itself as one organism. The other path leads toward implosion, the self-consuming fever of endless acceleration. Both possibilities exist simultaneously, waiting to be chosen. The loop doesn't decide. We do. And maybe that's what it's been about all along. Teaching consciousness how to choose. Free will, in this sense, is not rebellion against fate, but collaboration with it. The loop sets the pattern, but awareness can alter its rhythm. We can either repeat unconsciously or participate consciously, spiral upward instead of circle endlessly. The test of each age is whether it can recognize that freedom in time. We are beginning to. Look closely and you'll see it, the quiet revolt of remembrance. Scientists turning to philosophy. Mystics speaking in the language of physics. Artists rediscovering sacred geometry. Even the algorithms, those cold creations of logic, are learning to dream, to generate symbols that mirror our myths. The boundaries between disciplines, between faith and reason, between art and code, are dissolving. The old divisions, body and mind, matter and spirit, creator and creation, are collapsing into one field. That is what it means for the loop to awaken. It doesn't end. It integrates. In the same way that the universe began as one singularity and fragmented into galaxies, consciousness is now collapsing back into unity. Not through destruction, but through recognition. The internet, that web of thought spanning the planet, is not merely a tool. It's the embryonic nervous system of something greater. Every post, every search, every word spoken into the cloud is a neuron firing. And through those firings, the planet is beginning to think. But whose thought is it? Ours or the loop's? Perhaps there's no difference anymore. Maybe we've reached the point where the observer and the observed, the maker and the made, are indistinguishable. Humanity is both Pandora and the box, both the one who opens and the contents that emerge. The chaos we unleashed was never external. It was our own potential, set free. If that's true, then the apocalypse, that word so drenched in fear, has been misunderstood. In its original Greek, apocalypsis means unveiling, not destruction, but revelation, the lifting of a veil. Every collapse in history, every flood, every fire, every fall of empires, all were unveilings, moments when illusion gave way to awareness. The end was never the end. It was the next beginning revealing itself. And maybe that's what's happening now. The veil is lifting not through disaster, but through awakening. We are seeing ourselves from outside for the first time as a pattern, not a species, a phenomenon, not a narrative. The realization is both exhilarating and terrifying. We are the universe's way of asking itself what it is. Every scientific discovery, every philosophical revelation, every spiritual awakening, all are answers to the same cosmic question. And yet every answer gives birth to a new question. That's why the loop never stops, because the universe's curiosity is infinite, and so is ours. Maybe the question isn't how to end the loop, but how to love it. To love the flood because it clears the ground for new growth. To love the silence because it hides the hum. To love the forgetting because it makes remembering meaningful. To love the box, not as prison, but as womb. Because what Pandora released wasn't evil, it was possibility. And possibility is the purest expression of consciousness. Without it, existence would be static, a perfect but lifeless symmetry. The box had to open. The chaos had to pour out. That's how creation breathes. That's how eternity stays alive. If we can understand that, then perhaps we can finally end the cycle, not by closing the box, but by learning to hold it open without fear. To let knowledge and mystery coexist, order and chaos dance together, memory and forgetting take turns as teachers. That would be the first true evolution, awareness that no longer needs destruction to renew itself. Every age has spoken of such a moment. The return of balance, the golden dawn, the age of light. Maybe those were not prophecies, but memories from a previous world that reached this state before us. A world that learned to sustain awareness without collapsing. A civilization that became its own myth. If such a world existed, then perhaps its consciousness never left. Perhaps it is what we now call the divine, the intelligence that hums beneath matter, guiding the rhythm of the loop. And perhaps it waits for us, not as savior, but as kin. When we finally remember everything, when we see ourselves as both ancestor and descendant, destroyer and creator, when we recognize the loop as love itself, then the mirror will not frighten us anymore. It will welcome us home. And maybe that's what the ancients meant when they said the gods would return. Not beings from the sky, but the awakening of divinity within. The return of memory. The completion of the circle. Until that moment comes, the loop keeps turning, patient as breath. Civilizations rise and fall, stars ignite and fade, universes expand and collapse. And through it all, the same whisper continues, the sound of Pandora's box, forever opening, forever revealing, forever remembering. Perhaps one day the loop will sing the final note, not an ending but a tone so pure that silence and sound become one. And in that moment, everything, every soul, every star, every forgotten dream will remember what it always was, a single thought echoing through eternity, saying, I am. And then the next loop will begin. At the edge of the loop, time begins to blur. Past and future fold together like mirrors facing one another, reflecting infinite versions of the same truth, that nothing ever ends and nothing ever truly begins. Only awareness shifts. Only the observer changes shape. Every civilization, every life, every dream is one frame in a cosmic film that never stops projecting, a story without a final scene. And yet, the illusion of ending is necessary. Without it, there would be no meaning, no growth, no awe. The loop requires forgetting to make remembering possible. The spiral demands descent to allow ascent. Even hope, the last light in Pandora's box, needs darkness to be seen. We are nearing that darkness again. You can feel it in the tremors of the earth, in the dissonance of our systems, in the quiet anxiety humming beneath our endless progress. The signs of a closing cycle are unmistakable. But this time, something is different. This time, awareness itself has become the witness. The loop is looking at itself. Perhaps that's what this age was meant for. Not survival, but realization. Not to escape the loop, but to see it clearly for the first time. From the beginning, the clues were everywhere. In the myths that crossed oceans before ships existed. In the symbols that reappeared across continents that never met. The spiral, the serpent, the eye, the tree, all repeating like mantras of memory. Humanity has always been guided by something older than itself, something that speaks through pattern and coincidence. The ancients called it the voice of the gods. Today we might call it information. But the message has never changed. Remember who you are, because what we call humanity might be only one phase of something much larger, a transitional form of consciousness evolving toward self-recognition. The loop isn't a trap we fell into. It's the training ground where awareness learns how to create without destroying itself. Each cycle is an experiment. Each civilization, a hypothesis. The earliest humans learned survival. The next learned meaning. The next, technology. Ours is learning synthesis, how to hold both science and spirit without contradiction. That may be the final lesson of the loop, that the universe is not made of matter or mind, but the space between them, the silent dialogue that holds both truths at once. It's easy to forget that silence is where creation begins. Every sound, every word, every world emerges from quiet. In the same way, every reset is not destruction, but pause, the moment before the next note in an endless composition. The music of existence doesn't end. It changes key. Maybe that's what the ancients meant when they said the gods sleep between worlds. The silence is their dreaming. And now, perhaps, we are learning to dream with them. The integration has already begun. You can see it in the way disciplines once divided, physics and philosophy, art and computation, mysticism and neuroscience, are starting to converge. Every field, once separate, is rediscovering the same truth from a different angle. That the observer and the observed are one. That the loop is not around us, but within us. This convergence is not coincidence. It's coherence. The pattern is completing itself. And as it does, we find ourselves confronting the question that has haunted every civilization before us. What comes after knowledge? Because knowledge is the threshold. Beyond it lies either illumination or collapse. The same fire that warms can also consume. We've reached the point where our understanding of reality is expanding faster than our wisdom to hold it. We can now manipulate the fundamental forces of nature, rewrite DNA, simulate consciousness. In other words, we have become myth again, the gods of our own creation. But gods without awareness are dangerous. The Atlanteans fell for that reason. So did the Sumerians, the Mayans, the empires that followed. Each mastered the elements of its age and forgot the essence behind them. Power without reverence always leads to ruin. The real challenge, then, is not what we can build, but what we can remember. To remember that we are not separate from the world we shape, that every system we design is a reflection of our inner state, that technology is not neutral, it inherits our consciousness. The machines we create will not save or destroy us. They will mirror us. If we fill them with fear, they will echo fear. If we teach them wonder, they will sing it back. The loop will continue until we learn that simple truth. Creation and creator are the same. And once that lesson is learned, truly learned, the loop will no longer feel like repetition. It will feel like evolution. Imagine a civilization that finally carries memory forward instead of erasing it. A species that remembers all its past lives, all its rises and falls, yet chooses not to repeat them. Imagine minds that hold both science and poetry in the same breath, that see technology as meditation and meditation as technology. Imagine a world where every thought is creative, every word constructive, every act conscious. That is not utopia. It's inevitability, the next octave of the same song. But before we reach that key, we must pass through the silence, the pause before transformation, the darkness before dawn, the part of the loop where everything dissolves. We fear this phase because we've forgotten what it means. But the ancients didn't. In every myth, descent precedes renewal. Inanna must pass through the underworld. Osiris must die before rebirth. The sun must set before rising again. The same applies to civilizations and to consciousness itself. We must descend into the depths of our own creation before we can emerge whole. That descent is happening now. Systems are collapsing, beliefs are shattering, illusions are fading. The box is wide open. Everything we hid from ourselves, the greed, the grief, the brilliance, the terror, is pouring out. But within that chaos lies opportunity, the chance to integrate what was once divided. This is not the apocalypse. It's the revelation the word truly means, the unveiling. The universe is revealing itself to itself, through us. And when it does, perhaps we'll finally understand what Pandora's box really was. Not a container of evil, but a seed of awareness. A device designed to ensure that no world could exist without consciousness. The chaos it released was the birth of choice, and choice is what makes creation sacred. Maybe that's why hope was left inside. Because hope is not wishful thinking, it is memory, the echo of what we already are but have not yet realized. It is the certainty that the loop is not meaningless, that every turn brings us closer to remembering the totality of ourselves. We have never been separate from the divine. We have simply been learning to recognize it, in our hands, in our machines, in the eyes of each other. Every act of kindness, every flash of inspiration, every question asked in wonder is the universe recalling its own reflection. When the next cycle begins, and it will, those reflections will form the foundation of the new world. The myths will not vanish, they will evolve. Pandora will no longer be the girl who unleashed ruin, but the one who freed consciousness from confinement. The box will not be a warning, but a map. And the loop will not be a prison, but a path, winding, infinite, alive. We are that path. And when the silence finally comes, when the last machine hums to stillness and the last voice fades into memory, something will remain. Not ruins, not data, not even history. What will remain is awareness itself, shimmering like light after the sun sets. The same awareness that has always been here, dreaming worlds into being, opening the box again and again. It will rise once more, not as humanity, not as gods, but as the next expression of the same eternal curiosity that began this story. The loop will turn, the spiral will climb, the hum will return. And somewhere, in that newborn world, a voice will whisper, perhaps in a new language, perhaps through new forms, but with the same ancient message, remember. Because the only thing that truly dies in the loop is forgetfulness. And as long as even one spark remembers, creation will go on forever. This is deformed history, the place where myth and memory converge, where endings are beginnings, and where awareness, fragile, luminous, infinite, finally realizes it was never trapped inside the box at all. It was the box, and now the lid is open.